Welcome everyone. It's Darlene McLennan here, and on behalf of Attend and ADSET, I would like to welcome you to this webinar. Firstly, I would like to thank Sharon Kerr for sharing her wealth and experience and knowledge with us once again. Sharon gave this presentation at the 2016 conference of the Roundtable on Information Access for People with Print Disabilities in May this year, and she has kindly agreed to share this presentation with us today. Just a few housekeeping items before we start. This webinar is being live captioned by Jason from Bradley Reporting and will be recorded. The recording and the copy of the presentation will be placed on ADSET after the webinar, and probably in the next week the actual recording will be captioned. All participants have been muted. This is to ensure as little background noise is received during the webinar. Sharon will speak for 30 or so minutes, and for the first time we are trialling a more interactive presentation today, and what we're aiming to do is enable people to ask questions via your microphone. So if you have a question, raise your hand. You should be able to see that in your in the area of the GoToMeeting area. You can raise your hand and we will unmute you. However, if you do not have a microphone, you can still ask questions in the question pod. If you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, please email Jane at adset.admin@utas.edu.au. So hopefully you'll have an enjoyable presentation, enjoy the session, and hopefully have no technical issues. And now I'll hand over to Sharon. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you very much, Darlene, and hello to everyone. It's certainly been chilly in Oz here the last few days, and so please excuse me for presenting from home. I came home so that I'd have some good broadband to present to you. So hello from Australia and hello from Sydney. As I progress through the slides, I'll be just saying next slide and next slide. So for those of you who are following this with the electronic format of the PowerPoint, you'll be able to follow in that way. Okie doke, so let's go. We're going now to the next slide. Today with this presentation, I'm going to try to follow as much as possible the presentation that I actually gave to the roundtable. Now obviously some of the things that I presented were directed towards that organisation, but I will try to make it so that it's relevant to universities and TAFEs and colleges who are attending this seminar. Today I'll briefly introduce you to Global Access Project, who we are and what we're doing. I'll report on what we're finding in the higher education sector with regard to the support of students with a print disability. Now GAP actually works with all disabilities, and but for this presentation I'm focusing mostly on students with a print disability, so those who have dyslexia or vision impairment, etc. And in the presentation I gave, I highlighted the opportunities that Roundtable may be interested in addressing, but I think that these are opportunities that are also relevant to advocates within universities, support staffs within universities, TAFEs and colleges as well. Okay, so next slide. We're located in Sydney, Australia, and here you have an image on this page of 10 Bridge Street, which is where we were until last week, and now we are actually in York Street. Our senior team have extensive experience in higher education sector, and this has actually been both the basis of all of our careers. For me, I was a teacher before working in university. Then I was responsible for putting together online education through Macquarie University, and from that I got involved in ensuring that all courses are accessible for all students. and my colleagues, who I'll briefly introduce you to as well, have come through similar stories. Next slide. So David Wright, when I was at Macquarie University, he was the Deputy Vice-Chancellor there and Vice President. And he comes from very much a business background, and he has started a group called HECG, which is the Higher Education Consulting Group. And Global Access Project has been going now for 2.5 years, and we are a social enterprise that fits in under the Higher Education Consulting Group. Kylie, she also came from Macquarie University, and she has very much an analytics and operations background, and she was the Chief of Staff to 3 Vice-Chancellors. So very much understanding how universities work, and she looks after all of our operations as far as the conversions and the management of staff, etc. Next slide. So what we do, we provide consultancies to universities, TAFEs and private colleges, and we do customised conversion services. So if students present at a university and the university does not have capacity to meet that individual student's access needs, then we find a solution. So we have been doing this now since, well, I've been doing it since 2004. So we have quite an extensive amount of experience in finding new ways to do things and more efficiently. One of the things we've been doing more recently is information and toolkits for TAFEs and colleges, so that they've got all of the information together in one spot for staff, so that staff can then access information about various disabilities, about the sorts of things they need to consider when developing courses, and where to go to for help. And we're also doing reviews and helping with planning. Next slide. The professional development to teaching support and administrative staff, so that's another thing we're doing, is for institution-wide training, developing courses and delivering those. We have an instance of Moodle, and I develop courses, and our team develops courses that we deliver through that instance of Moodle and can push that out across institutions, and training seminars, etc. as well. So really, whatever organisations are needing, that is what we do to try to meet those needs. Next slide. Okay, so that's enough of who we are. Now we're getting on to I guess the more important thing is what we are finding in the higher education sector with regard to supporting students with a print disability. Next slide. When I'm talking about higher education sector, and for people who are in universities, this is often quite a shock, is that I'm not just talking about universities. I'm also talking about the TAFE sector, and I'm talking about the private colleges. Many are not aware that the private colleges and the TAFEs are now actually offering degrees, are now moving into a lot of the space that was traditionally that of the universities. So for this I'm going to look at the universities, the TAFEs and the colleges. So looking first at the universities and looking at the profile of the people who are attending, I'm sure that a lot of you are absolute experts in this. But what we have found is that there's a major shift away from focusing on supporting students with a sensory or physical disability to supporting students with mental health issues. That's not meaning that the students with sensory disabilities aren't being supported. What it means is that the responsibility for supporting those students and getting alternate formats and negotiating what their learning needs are quite often being shifted to other areas of the university, such as the library. We're finding that there is a change in the profile of disability support staff in universities. 10, 15 years ago, you would have found people who were coming from accessibility backgrounds, who knew about assistive technologies, who were very aware of what was required in alternate formats, who engaged very closely with groups such as the Round Table for print disabilities. Whereas now we're finding that increasingly universities are having to employ people with psychology backgrounds so that they are, and healthcare workers, to meet the tsunami of students who are presenting with mental health support needs. So that is actually changing the focus in the universities to quite a large extent. Next slide. And with this, we're seeing a shift away from resourcing for alternate formats towards counselling. So 10, 15 years ago, it would not have been uncommon for a university to have spent many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars on alternate formats for students who presented with access needs. Now, what we're finding is those many hundreds of thousands of dollars are being spent on staffing and to try to meet the needs of students. With this, we're finding that broadly there's little institutional awareness about accessibility. Previously, when you had people who were assistive technology specialists, and when I'm talking about assistive technology, I'm talking about speech to text and text to speech and programs such as Win or even the inbuilt software that's on your laptop or your handheld device. So because those people are not there, we're finding that there's little institutional awareness of accessibility. And there's widely held views, for example, that all ebooks are accessible, so that they say to students, look, ebooks are accessible, the library's got ebooks, you don't need any further assistance. That's what we're finding. Next slide. We're also finding that more often than not, students are told not what they're told what formats that they can request, rather than ask what they need. Large print is, in the main, no longer needed or requested, that's a great thing. But for some people, they really would still like hard copy, large print, especially when it comes to terminologies or key resource materials. And we're finding that Braille is rarely offered, and for some this is problematic, and it's something that we're finding. Next slide. While we're finding technologies are being relied on, and they're saying it's okay, technologies are there now, that you can use these technologies to access your learning materials, few universities, and I know that because I heard the list of some of the universities that are represented in today's some of you actually do, but many universities do not provide the technologies for students. They are expecting that the students will provide them themselves, and few universities have any expertise at all in advising students about what is available. So, next slide. Okay, now for the TAFES. With the election coming up, I'm sure many of you have been hearing lots and lots of stories about what's happening in TAFES throughout our country. With the introduction of Smart and Skilled to the TAFE system, there have been major, major changes impacting on students with a print disability. And I can't say that these have been good changes. We're seeing that with the introduction of high course costs, that many institutes have actually experienced large declines in the numbers of students with a disability enrolling. We're seeing that a lot of disability staff have actually been put off, and that there's been whole cycles of change management that have come through the TAFEs. I'll give you an example of a New South Wales example here, just to show you how people with a print disability have been disadvantaged because of this. Last year what happened is that the fees came in for TAFE courses. Now, we've heard about the $100,000 degrees that were mooted for universities, but to do courses at TAFE, it is not uncommon for a course to cost $30,000, $40,000. I was really shocked to find that that was the case, because I always felt that TAFE courses were the entry level course that students would go into, and that then they would progress to university studies. But that is the case. There has been very high fees that have been placed on these courses. So what happened when that originally happened is that there was a large decline in the numbers of students with a disability enrolling, because people were worried if they would ever get employment or what was going to happen. So there were large declines in the numbers. And so when the numbers dropped, they put off the disability support workers. The government then, in early this year, has now made it free for students with a disability to enrol in TAFEs across Australia. So that has meant now that a lot of students with disability have re-enrolled, but the support staff have already gone, and once you've taken a redundancy or a voluntary redundancy from the sector, you can't be employed again for 2 years. So it's just a schmoz, it really is. So at the end of all of this, you've got students with a print disability trying to engage with their enrolment process and engage with their courses. Next slide. And this is that, on this slide I'm just showing the story that I've just given about New South Wales. Okay, I'm going to the next slide. What I mentioned earlier on is that TAFEs are increasingly moving into the space that was traditionally the domain of universities, offering degrees, not just degrees, but master's degrees. And they're going into the international student space as well, and attracting those international students. Therefore, the big thing there is the developing and delivering the courses online. And again, this was something that was primarily the space of universities, but this is now the space of TAFEs. Next slide. All right, finally, private colleges. Now these are the real surprise were for me over the last 2.5 years. I've got here that there are now over 4,500 private colleges in Australia. I think the figure is actually closer now to 5,500. There's private colleges that are being registered daily. These registered training organisations are offering qualifications ranging from Certificate 1 right through to postgraduate qualifications. Some of them are very large. Some of these colleges have 30,000 plus students. They are the size of a university. And they are charging the big fees, and the students are paying fee help as well. Next slide. So while some of these colleges are big, and as I said, they're as big as universities, we're finding that there is often little to no understanding of the needs of students with a print disability. It's not uncommon to hear that colleges have chosen students to go elsewhere. They've just said, no, look, sorry, we haven't got resources for this. You go elsewhere. Oh, no, you can't do this course. Go elsewhere. There's the level of student support is aimed at the general student body who may have trouble organising themselves, for example. Again, a little bit more understanding about mental health, but very little at all about print disability. Next slide. With this, there's that heavy reliance on the unjustifiable hardship clause in the Disability Discrimination Act and the education standards for not making an adjustment. And so they will hit a student and say, I'm sorry, we cannot do it, rather than doing it. Next slide. The adjustments that they do make often do not include alternative formats. They might be giving someone more time or being able to resit an exam, but they're not providing the student with their learning materials in a format that they can access. We're finding that the teaching staff are subject specialists and often without formal education qualifications. Now, when I started in the university sector, this was really the case then as well, that back in 2002 even, or in the late 90s, you'd find a lot of the teaching staff in the universities would be subject specialists and have absolutely no understanding of teaching methodology or pedagogy or how to go about teaching in an engaging way. But over the time, there has been a lot of professional development put into the universities into effective teaching. And so while in universities a lot of the academics are still subject specialists and not actual teachers, a lot of them have had professional development and they understand the concept of effective teaching. But what I'm finding in the private colleges in particular is that they're quite often people have no formal education qualifications at all. Next slide. So the next thing that I did with my presentation was I talked about the opportunities for the round table, and this is where I believe that there are opportunities for all of us. So I've kept this in because I believe it's still relevant. I've said to the round table that the sector is looking for standards, that we are all looking for standards, that every university, TAFE and college, they want a standard to say this is what you need to present to students who present with X, Y, Z. And, but most universities are totally unaware that there have been standards developed by the round table. Now, if you go to their website, and I'm sure Darlene can put a link onto the ADSET site if it's not already there, they have developed standards for conversions into alternate formats, for Braille, for e-text, etc. So they have a lot of standards that they've actually done over years. When I look at the standards though, they are very, very thick. And what I said to the round table is that we need to have them in a format that they're easy for people who have no knowledge of print disabilities at all to understand. I was just saying basic 5 points, this is what you need to do. And when I shared this with the round table, they took it on board, and I understand that there was quite a bit of discussion around that. So I'm very hopeful that the round table itself will put out some easy-to-use standards for conversions and alternate formats and adjustments so that all universities can access them. Next slide. While legal compliance imperatives worked overseas, it has not worked in Australia. Now, for those of you who've been following some of the blogs that I've been putting up over the time, you will have read about the litigation that took place with some of the major providers of MOOCs, Harvard and MIT, and through their edX offering, and that they were brought to a place where they had to make sure that they're accessible. And that has had a ripple effect actually through all online courses and all course delivery through the United States. Accessibility of courses, universal design of learning, these are now core elements in developing courses in the United States. There's whole schools in universities that have been developed and are teaching practitioners how to develop courses using universal design. McGill University in Canada is another one that has a whole school of universal design of learning. And that has been because the legal imperative that's been driving that. But in Australia, we just have not had that. And I really believe that there is a need for advocacy in this area, that especially with the appointment of the new Disability Discrimination Commissioner, I believe that all of us need to be advocating that there needs to be some action as far as getting universities, TAFEs and colleges to meet their legal obligations in meeting the needs of students with a print disability. Next slide. Okay. I believe that it's important in this environment that those who are advocating for access to education for students with a disability who require adjustments, that we work together. We need to collaborate with other groups and feed information into bodies such as ADSEP. And Darlene, I put this in, this was before I knew I was redoing this presentation for you guys here. But for too long, it's disability has been siloed. So you've got the needs of people with maybe a hearing loss or deafness over in this camp, and you've got people over in this camp who, for students with a print disability and such as sight loss or dyslexia, and then you've got intellectual impairment over here, and we just have to work together. You know, we can't be competing with other areas of the sector. We are all after the same thing. We are after access to education for students with a print disability, and we just need to work together with this. And I just think that if at your university you are developing fantastic resources, why not share them through ADSET so that other universities and TAFEs and colleges can use them? We certainly are at GAP. We're trying to provide anything we can and make it open source. With my other hat, I've got, like all of us, I've got many hats, but one of my hats is I'm National Secretary for ODLA, which is the Open and Distance Learning Association of Australasia, and very much promoting this openness and sharing, and I think that it's something that we need to do. Next slide. I also think we need to be creative in how we approach community education and awareness of the needs of students with a print disability. Now, one of the ideas that I put to the round table was maybe we need to look at giving awards for education providers who are providing accessible education and good support for students. And remembering that with lifelong learning, we are all potentially students. And with lifelong learning, we're the whole country is potentially a market, really, for all of this. So I think that even at university level, maybe that's something you can put to your senior executive, that there are awards given to various, to faculties that are doing the right thing, or that are really trying to embed universal design of learning into their presentations, that they are providing accessible formats for students to access their learning. You know, we've tried the stick, and as I've said before, while I believe we've got to be trying to push for compliance, I think we need a few carrots out there, and for people to realise that when they do this, it doesn't just help students with a print disability or any disability, it helps all students. If students can have responsive, and it helps the administration of the university. You know, if you are delivering all of your material in accessible text, it means it's responsive text, which means that they can then use analytics, robotics, etc., to farm the data out of what's happening in the university. If it's not responsive text, and if it's just put up as an image, nothing can be extracted from that. Okay, next slide. I've said to the round table that they need to ensure that the membership has up-to-date information on assistive technologies and aware of what is available. Now, this is equally relevant for universities, TAFEs and colleges. Our students don't know what they don't know, and if we can't show those students what technologies are available, then when it comes to them doing their assessments and reviews through the National Disability Insurance scheme, they won't know what to ask for. Under the NDIS, employment and education are not covered. So if a student, for example, needs assistive technology to access their learning, they need to understand what it is, if it's WIN or if it's Read and Write Gold or if it's JAWS, so that they can then, when they're having their plan done through the NDIS, say, I need this software to access all of my general reading for planning my life, for you know, the bigger picture outside of education. They can't do that unless they know what technology is available. Some of the companies, such as quantum technologies, and I think I mentioned them in a previous webinar that I did through ADSET, they're quite happy to come out and do trade shows, for want of a better word, you know, for organisations. At the Pathways conference, there will be booths where the companies will be demonstrating the assistive technologies. If you're going to the Pathways conference, make sure that you really engage with those assistive technologies so that you can tell students what's available. Okay, next slide. For those working in universities, TAFEs and colleges, and that's all of us, I believe it's important to advocate for strategies such as universal design of learning. Because if we can minimise the demand for adjustments and have creative solutions, and the one I suggested there was employing students with a print disability to do end-user checking. So, for example, you've all got students with a print disability. Why not put them on the payroll and get them to check materials for your institution so that they get that work experience, and it also brings staff into contact with someone who has a print disability and understands then what they need to consider when they're developing content and material. Next slide. This is the best part. So this is questions and discussion. So do we have any questions? Is anyone game enough to go on the speaker here and ask a question?
Thanks, Sharon. That was great. So we'll see if anybody puts their hand up. But just one of the questions we've had in the question pod is, you said that the government had made TAFE free for people with disability enrolled in TAFE. Yeah, so I don't know if that is Australia-wide. So I know that might have happened in New South Wales, but I know...
Yeah.
So is that only in New South Wales? You don't know of any other states?
I'd be interested to hear from other people in other states if they found that in their state, but that was certainly a New South Wales initiative. But it was, as I said in the presentation, it was just you wouldn't say comedy. It was just crazy stuff because you had the enrolments going down and then the disability support staff, some of them had jobs 20 years, you know, were put off. And then they've reshaped their lives and gone off and doing their thing, and then legislation changed, the numbers have gone up, there's no one there who even knows what, you know, e-text is.
It's quite frustrating. Now, James Newton from TAFE in Tasmania, I've unmuted you, James, if you're able to talk and ask your question.
Thanks very much, Darlene, and thanks, Sharon, for your presentation. Just a query, I came in to working as a disability liaison officer at TAFE in Tassie, partly because of my expertise in accessibility of print information and assistive technologies. I've had to learn all the, I mean, I've got a bit of a background in counselling, etc. as well, so I've got my head around, but definitely agree with you about the tsunami of mental health issues that are coming in and the reprioritisation.
Yeah.
With regard to the whole argument around print, I guess another area that I really experience when I'm chasing down textbooks for students and information, which a lot of teachers have to rely on for course modules, is how appalling the formatting of textbooks and other booklets, etc. is being put out by publishers.
Yeah.
I mean, first they'll just want to release it as a PDF. It's either scanned or it's a word processed document that they've converted to PDF, and they will then initially argue with you that that's the only format they've got it available in. And we know how inaccessible PDFs are for a range of users in our sort of cohort. But then when I get them to backtrack their Word documents, they've been very visual in the way that they're formatted, so they haven't marked their documents up correctly. So then for me to convert, it's it just takes less time, although it's still a lot of time, to actually just start retyping the whole document from scratch. And you can imagine what a huge consumption that is. So, I mean, the thing around national standards, we need to be forcing publishers around the development of what they put together, the availability of formats around that, and not having them being able to fall back on the argument of security and copyright, because Australia still hasn't signed off on that. The US and Australia have still sort of hedged and blocked and delayed the UN's move to stop copyright ruling around access to information for people with disability.
Can I just comment there? Just two things that, because I want to hear the next part that's still coming, but I don't want to lose the essence of what you said there. The two things, and I'm not an expert in it, but the Marrakesh agreement may change things. But after what we've seen happen in the last week with Brexit, I can't see that, you know, this is going to be a high priority thing for countries to sign. Australia has signed, and last time I saw there's another 9 that need to sign before it comes into effect. And what that will actually do, I understand, is that if material's been made accessible in another country, we'll be able to share it. But that's one thing, and I'm not an expert in that, but that's just something to keep an eye on. The other thing of what you're saying about forcing publishers, this is where they got to in the United States, but where it came from is that the universities, so senior management in universities, what came together, and we can do it here for goodness sake. We've only got a handful of universities. You know, when relatively speaking, you know, under 40 universities, they got together and they said to the publishers, we will not put your textbooks on our reading list unless they are accessible.
Yep.
And they use that combined buying power to force the publishers to do the right thing.
Yep.
But that's not going to happen unless senior executive see the business case for this. I went down to Universities Australia because I thought maybe in Canberra if I could talk to the Vice Chancellors and just say, guys, you need to work together. This is something that's costing you money, it's costing you student retention, and it's something that can be fixed. But I agree with you, James, that I think that there needs to be this combined effort to get publishers to do the right thing.
Yeah,
so,
it's strategic, definitely. And what I mean, they're really good points. But the other thing I know too is that the development of materials, I mean, people come into admin or do that sort of transcription of information into documents or books are coming from a range of backgrounds without proper training. But what I also notice, I guess from TAFE and uni perspectives, I've seen a lot of the training manuals from training.gov.au around teaching people how to do business admin, around creating documents, and that's where people are taught the bad practice, because all of those training manuals are teaching people to develop documents without using proper styles and formatting, the same for templates.
Yeah.
And so we even need to go that far back that we're demanding that even the delivery and training documentation and packages are teaching people how to create stuff where they fulfill their obligations under the legislation.
Yeah. See, this is one of the big things that happens in universities, states and colleges that I think has fueled a lot of these problems is the increasing casualisation of staff. So whereas you would have had 15 years ago more permanent staff who went through professional development, and then in faculties you had people who were real ambassadors for this, and then they sort of teach their colleagues in the next room, how to do things in an accessible way. That's been lost because the casualisation, often the teachers are teaching materials they haven't developed. They're coming in maybe a few days prior to the classes starting, and then they're looking at reading lists. They're thinking, oh my goodness, it should have this reading as well. So they're adding another reading on, and not necessarily taking anything off because they don't have the confidence to say, well, we need to cut this out of the course. So all of this is coming together as a perfect storm for inaccessibility for students, and it needs to be addressed.
The other area there is procurement, which you touched on, and there doesn't seem to be anything significantly strategic between all the states and also education facilities and anywhere that gets access to print information. But I've been arguing for it for a while, and we hope we see inroads soon.
I encourage you to go to the
software. Yeah, around software procurement, I've been pushing that one here in Tasmania a lot, that government departments are actually including accessibility as a requirement for tender briefs that go out for procuring software. But we need to, course areas, libraries, etc., need to have those same requirements for information that they're going out and requesting for their information. Is procurement, but some really good statement, is there anything out there? Is it getting shared with unis? If one uni or TAFE does it, is it getting shared? Because I'm sure it could be duplicated as opposed to starting from scratch and there being a lot of inconsistency.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you, James. I'm just
Sorry
noticing
about
the
not
time.
pausing.
That's all right. No, not a problem. But has anybody else got any other questions? I'll mute you again, James, just to stop the background noise. Is there any other questions that people have for Sharon? All quiet on the Western Front here. I just wondered just a couple of things that you said, Sharon, in regards to the roundtable. It appears that their website's down at the moment, but we will, because otherwise we would have put the link up for people to see today, but we will put the link with the information from the presentation when we put that up on ADSET. But also there is some information of the roundtable actually on ADSET itself, so we'll also put that link, so which is good. Yeah, and just on another side, just probably a plug for ADSET, we're actually in the process of working with Martin Kelly, who was working at RMIT on inclusive technologies. We've actually employed him to update the inclusive technologies information on ADSET, so I'm hoping probably by I was about to say early July, but that's not far away, is it? Hopefully in the next few weeks that will go live on the website. So we've actually reviewed everything, so that'll be up to date on, you know, for print disabilities, etc. So which is absolutely fantastic.
Just another thought I had when James was speaking as well, and I really think that we are, as I said, when you go back and you think how far we've come since 2004, how quickly, 12 years, and we've seen a huge change in the way education is delivered, and I sincerely believe the next 5 years we're going to see that bigger change again. I think we're going to see greater use of teacher bots so that students won't actually have live tutors. They'll have computer programs giving them first level responses. So we're going to have input into the algorithms, making sure that there's access has been considered there. Also with the use of virtual reality going into and the use of other multimedias in teaching. For those students with a print disability, obviously if they've got a visual disability as well, we're going to have to do a lot more by way of things such as video descriptions, etc., and alternate formats of that virtual reality material. Now again, if we teach people to use universal design of learning right from the start, there's not a problem, because every time we've got virtual reality, that has started with a storyboard. That started with someone thinking, this is what we want to teach, this is how we want to represent it, and you need to have those original foundation documents preserved so that they can be farmed to deliver to students in a way that they can access it.
Yep, no, definitely. All right, well, we haven't had any other questions, so that's an easy ride for you. So if you want to click to your last slide.
Okay, so I'm clicking to my last slide. Okay, a final thought. Fancy Sharon having a final thought. Okay, assistive technology, universal design of curriculum, and conversions of inaccessible materials are the 3 pillars for access. And it's up to us, for all of us, to ensure that all 3 are implemented. It is not just a matter of saying, you know, there's assistive technologies and that's enough. We have to make sure that the students have their learning materials in a format that they can access them using those assistive technologies. So thank you very much to everyone, and please, if I can help in any way, don't hesitate to contact me. I'm happy to speak with you, to your management groups, to whatever I can do to help improve access in your institution for students with a print disability.
Okay, well, it sounds like a good time to end because you've just got the low battery on your Mac, so before you cut out. So I really want to thank you, Sharon, for once again imparting your knowledge. I think there are lots of things for us to think about as a sector, and even one I'm wanting to take away is actually the idea about awards, and I might even talk to the round table about an award through Attend as well to really promote that the inclusive practices that so many universities and TAFE do so well, but we often don't celebrate that. So I think that's a great idea. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you everybody else for sharing your time with you. I hope it was as valuable as I experienced it. We will send out a survey to get your feedback, and I hope you all have a good rest of the day. So thank you, Sharon. Cheers.
Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you.